Today is January 26th, 2026, which means that 11 years ago, I experienced something that would forever alter the way that I looked at mental health and suicide. Before I go any further with this episode, I want it to be known that this is not a condemnation of mental health disorders and mental health issues and suicide. This is not a condemnation. This is not a glorification. This is simply my own lived experience with an event that occurred that had profound impact on me, as well as a numerous number of other people. And I felt like it was important to talk about for a number of different reasons. One, mental health is part of my journey. Suicidality is part of my journey. And I know that I'm not the only one that goes through this. And I understand that suicidality and even mentioning of suicide is not really what YouTube really likes to promote or have in the highlights, but it's important because a lot of people struggle with it. For those of you who are just coming here for the first time and have made it to this point of the video, my name is Matthew, and I am an alcoholic, 7 years sober. I was a former medic in the military, served 6.5 years, and then I became a paramedic and cumulatively worked for a period of 17 years in that role. And in 2017, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And prior to my diagnosis, I suffered immensely with suicidal ideations. I had my own encounters with attempts and planning, and that's about as far as I'll get into on that. I wrote a book back in 2019 that chronicles that encounter quite vividly, and so I feel like I've wrote it, I've put it out there. It's in the place it needs to be, and so if you would like to read it, you can check out the book, and if you don't want to buy the book, which I completely understand, you can go to my website and read it absolutely free. Not the book, but the story and my journey with suicidal ideation and such. The event I'm talking about, though, is not my own personal event. The event I'm talking about involves a paramedic by the name of Greg Turner. He is a former Edmonton paramedic who, on the evening of January 25th, died by way of suicide while still on shift. He claimed his life in the back of an ambulance. And part of the reason that I wanted to talk about this today is because on social media recently, I came across a feed or a post that I think highlights the real struggles that paramedics and first responders are still facing. And it is this one here. It is from Cracked Armor, who does amazing things for police officers and first responders with mental health issues. So the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the official Royal Canadian Mounted Police, has been tagged in this post. And it says, RCMP are renewing mental health conversations following the death of 2 officers. This was posted January 22nd at 3:40 a.m. 2 Manitoba RCMP officers, 1 off-duty and 1 on-duty, have died by suicide in the last months. The deaths have deeply affected members across the province as conversations continue around workload, burnout, and mental health pressures within the force. There's a lot more here that's written. If you'd like to go check it out, you can do so on the Facebook page, Cracked Armor. He's worth following, and there's news sources. We can't post news here in Canada, so we can only do screenshots in Canada. We can't post actual news links. So there's a news link article that he posted here and another one here. This one's from 2024, and I don't know when this one is from, but he's posted many different many different articles that highlight the real issue that RCMP members face and first responders in general, and I commented underneath here. Greg Turner was somebody I knew. He was somebody I worked with. When I was in the military, we actually had to do ride-outs on the ambulance to keep up with our maintenance of clinical skills, skill set and practice. And Greg Turner was one of the guys that I first met on civilian ambulance, and I worked under his tutelage while I was still in the military. And he kind of showed me the main differences between what I was learning in the military to what civilian paramedics do day in and day out. And it was eye-opening, and it was also heartbreaking too, the type of call volume that paramedics respond to, that I was, only kind of tangentially aware, just because I had gone through my practicum. I had seen some experiences on East Hastings in Vancouver's downtown east side. And so I had some exposure to what civilian paramedics do, but it's a little different when you're fully certified, fully qualified, and you're out on the ambulance, and they're trying to watch you as you go through pre-deployment training and report back to your military COs to let them know how you're doing. But Greg was one of those special human beings that was very patient, very kind, all too willing to teach, and unfortunately, on the evening of January 25th in 2015, I guess it would be in the early morning hours of the 26th of 2015. He would lose his life to suicide while on shift in the back of the ambulance, and there's a news article from CBC where they kind of talk a little about it. See if I can play it here. It's his wife talks about them. We're gonna watch it here and just listen.
Our family's just going through a haze, I think. It helps that the kids are so young that they don't fully understand. And so there's still laughter and giggles and, playing with the kids, and that still is happening, and that helps for sure. But they don't have their dad. I was unsure how serious it was. I asked him several times, are we looking at something that's, life or death? And he said no, that he could wait.
Okay, so I'm done with that. It's on the CBC. You can go check it out if you want to. She is an incredibly brave human being, which is of no surprise that her and Greg ended up together in life. She openly talked about her feelings in the wake of Greg's death, and spoke about kind of the pressures and the stressors that sort of led to it, and the failures in the system that led to it. And those failures and those gaps still exist across our first response sinew, be it policing, fire, paramedicine. These things are still very real. They're still very much faced by our first responders. And right now in BC, our paramedics are on a potential strike. And one of the things that they're requesting is better access to mental health supports. And the province is dragging their feet on providing them with answers and access to these mental health supports. And I find that to be reprehensible. I did another video where I talked about the paramedic strike and the potentials that that could cause. These things are very real. And the reason that I at the beginning when I talked about how Greg's death 11 years ago, how it reshaped how I thought about mental health and about suicidality, was when I worked as a paramedic, it was easier for me to be angry or to be callous or to be dismissive of the patients that I encountered who had died by suicide, of which there were many, too many, in all different manner of modality. It was easy. I think it was survival for me to be that way, to be callous and to judge and to call it a weakness, to condemn it, to judge it. I had some impartiality in that I didn't know these people. And so therefore it was easier for me to think that these things that I were asserting were true, that these were universal truths, objective truths. These truths were not applicable to Greg. When I got the phone call that Greg had died and I tried to apply the same veneer of myopia to judging Greg and his death, I fell into a cognitive dissonance because I couldn't marry it up. I couldn't marry up the fact that Greg, this guy that I knew who was the consummate professional, just a wonderful human being, not even a selfish bone in his body, ever compassionate, ever empathetic, ever professional, and so skilled at the job of paramedicine, was like all these other people. Oh, selfish. Oh, self-centered. Oh, weak-minded. Oh, weak-willed. Oh, all these little fables I told myself. I couldn't apply them to Greg. And so my world started to crumble in, because if I couldn't apply it to Greg for logical reasons, I then had to look at all these other suicides that I had attended and go, I can't apply it there either. And so I got hit with like this torrent of sadness. It's just a tsunami of grief that hit me all at one time. And I was still actively drinking at that time. I was deep into my addiction at that time. This was around 2020 or 2015, sorry. And it is, I'm coming up on 10 years in therapy. And by 10 years in therapy, I don't just mean once a month. I don't just mean a couple times a year. Up until probably 2 years ago, I was in therapy every single week. And about 5 years ago, I was in therapy twice, sometimes 3 times a week for a couple of years, from 2017 probably till 2019. Actually from 2017 till 2020, I was in therapy for 2 to 3 times a week. And I also went into rehab for alcoholism in 2018. And 2019, I ended up meeting Sheena, who I call my adult, as a joke, but I met the love of my life, and she lived in BC and I was living in Toronto at the time, and BC is where I'm from. So the move back to BC made logistical sense, as well as moving to be with her and start a life. So in 2020, I had to get a different therapist because my therapist can't practice across different provinces. And so I had to get a different therapist, and I had one who I was seeing every like twice a week as well. That wasn't really working out for me. And then I met the current therapist that I have now, and we see each other once every other week. It's coming up on 10 years of that style of therapy. And I still battle with the guilt that I had from all those previous judgments, especially around now, especially around this day, around reflecting on Greg and my own ideations toward suicide when I was in a really dark place. I have become much less judgmental in many different ways, and specifically when it comes to suicide, because the common belief is that people who commit suicide are selfish, and that, in my opinion, is so wholly inaccurate and wrong and just so narrow-sighted. These people are in immense and immeasurable amounts of pain. And to them, when they're in that level, that seems like the only way out. And sometimes, before they have a chance to see anything else, before they have a chance to get help, before they have a chance to maybe reverse that decision, it's too late. And we lose them. And I don't know that there is a way to do the job of a police officer or do the job of a paramedic or a firefighter without having some of the consequence of those jobs. Because you're taking humans and putting them in a sea of inhumanity and asking them to keep their head above water for 25 plus years so they can reach retirement. The average paramedic career in North America is 5.5 years. 5.5 years. Multiple studies done on that, mostly out of the States, but I believe Simon Fraser did one. I could be corrected on that, but I believe Simon Fraser. If not, I believe there was a university out in Manitoba that did a study on this, and they've basically came down to 5.5 years. It's a long ways off at 25. Now, it's not to say that every paramedic, only works 5.5 years. There's a lot of medics that work longer. I know plenty of medics that have been been on the job for far longer than that. And I know medics who didn't even make it a year. The spectrum, the diversity of job longevity is so all over the place. Greg's death was the catalyst that made me start to rethink suicide and rethink my narrative of suicide. And I could not in any justifiable way call Greg selfish, and therefore I had to reshape and rethink how I thought of every other suicide. And 2 years after Greg died by suicide, I lost my mother to suicide. And that was another huge, mind-altering, earth-shattering reformation for me. And about just shy of 3 years after my mother died by suicide, I lost my sister to suicide. Jeffrey Rondeau, lost him to alcoholism and just a neglect of care for himself. He was somebody I served with in the military. Another paramedic, Christopher Atkin, 2019, he died by suicide. And these people aren't weak. They're not weak-willed. They're not weak of mind. They're not weak of spirit. These were some of the strongest, most compassionate human beings that I've ever come across in my life. And somewhere along the lines of giving little pieces of themselves to this world, they fell ill and they became injured and they fell through the cracks. And unfortunately, they eventually lost their lives and we lost them. Today is a day that will always have a sense of heaviness, a weighted sense of introspection for me. In recent years, I've tried to not get lost in those ruminations, the heaviness of them, and I've tried to transform how I tackle these days. And the subject matter of this is such that it's hard to have any sort of levity when discussing a topic like this. But I find it important to talk about it because to say Greg's name out loud, to speak about Greg out loud, for me, that is a gift, because I am then telling the world about this really special human that was once here. And my hope is that people will find special humans like Greg in people in their own lives, or maybe in just people they haven't encountered yet. And my other hope is that people who were like me, who have black and white judgments on suicide and people who have died by suicide, that maybe they'll pause and start to think deeper about the people who truly do die by suicide. Whether you want to say committed suicide or killed themselves or die, these are all, you can use whatever language you want. I don't generally subscribe to you have to say, oh, they died by suicide. I choose to say died by suicide because for me, that's what fits the new place in which I have placed these losses into. And so that's because they died by this. It was an injury. It was an illness. It was a sickness. It was a consequence of life and service. My mother was just unwell, a lifetime of traumas and medications and pills and addictions. And my sister, again, she too had a lifetime of traumas and unresolved issues with very significant traumas, and they led to their death. I can't say, oh, they committed to it, right? They committed. No, they were really, really, really pained human beings. And Greg was no different in that his pain was very, very real, and it suffocated him. And when you're in your dark moments, your darkest moments, when you have been wading through a sea of hopelessness and you can't even think or contemplate hope, the thought of suicide is something that can hit your brain. It can hit your thoughts in your thinking space quite prevalently and quite with some sincere potency. I live a really good life day to day. I live a really good life. I have a beautiful, beautiful wife. I have 2 kids with they're her kids, but I think of them as my own, and they are 2 beautiful human beings. I get along with their fathers really well, and they're wonderful, beautiful human beings as well. And that's not everyone can say that, right? Not everyone can say, oh, they get along with the whole dynamics is so beautiful, and it's such a wonderful way of life. And there's no reason for me to on paper think of dark thoughts. But there are times where I go through a period of really bad nightmares over a large stretch of time where I'm not sleeping. And sometimes I wake up hearing screaming. Sometimes I wake up and I smell things that aren't actually in the room, like decay or blood. And I have a lot of tools at my disposal for bringing myself back to present. But in therapy the other day, I equated it to being like a boxer. You're in the ring, you're fighting the good fight. Sometimes you get hit with a liver shot and you got to take a knee. You go down and you're tired. You're in the late rounds. You're tired. Your stamina gets low. And there are times when I wake up from that stuff and I think about how I want the pain to just not be there anymore, that I don't want these things in my head anymore. These ghosts that I live with, these experiences that I've had, they're never going to go away. And that can be sometimes a very daunting thing to think about. And when they come back with ferocity, it's easier to think about the silence and romanticize the silence. It's a respite. It's a break. I wouldn't ever feel these things again. Inversely, I would never feel love again. I would never feel Sheena's skin again or her scent. I'd never give the kids a hug again. I'd never feel the sun, the warmth. I'd never feel the rain or smell the rain on those late spring mornings, or see the dew in the grass when October's getting closer to November, the fall foliage, the time with my buddy Cozy, and dinners with my brother Drew, golf with my brother Steven, there's so many things, Amy coming over to visit with Sheena and me being downstairs playing video games, knowing that they're safe upstairs. These are the things that I use to combat those darker thoughts. And it's not that they're easy to replace. These are the skills that I have learned to implement over time. And when a day like today comes around, I know there's people out there suffering right now. I know there's people out there possibly even watching this that are in their dark places, that are in their places of despair. Maybe they've just, gone through a separation, right? Maybe it's the guy who's living single in a really shitty apartment while the ex is living in a beautiful house, their once beautiful house with the kids, and she's already moved on, has a new man. Or maybe it's the single mom who's working desperately, clawing with her fingernails to make ends meet and trying to do all the things right, and it's just not working out that way. Sorry, I'm getting messages here. I gotta close that out. Sorry. I know there's people in dark times. There's people in heavy places. There's a lot of people that go through a lot of things, and right now, our world is so all over the place, and it can feel pretty heavy and pretty scary. And so it's easy to have those thoughts. It's easy to think about them in terms of escape. And I'm here to tell you that there is always another way. Suicide is never the answer. It is never the answer. It is a symptom of tremendous pain. That is what it is. Suicide is not an answer. It's not an antidote. It is poison from pain. And so if you are struggling right now, or if you know someone that is struggling right now, just talk to someone. Anyone. You may think that nobody wants to listen. You may think that you have no one. You may think that, I'm saying this and you go, no, but I really have no one. I promise you there is someone. Even if you haven't met them yet, there is someone. Sometimes all it takes is that one trip to the hospital, that one trip to the psychologist's office, one 911 call. There is always someone. Always. I will miss Greg for the rest of my life. He taught me so much about what it means to be a good medic and a good human. And I knew him for only a fraction of time that many of the other people know him for. I worked with him marginally. We weren't on the same platoon. We worked on the same ambulance. He was on the day shift while we were coming on nights. But he was a special human being. That's all there is to say about it. He should be here. He should be here. But he is not. But you are. You still are. And so am I. And if I can serve as nothing else than as an example that you can find your way to a better place. You don't have to be a perfect person. I am the least perfect person. I've made so many terrible decisions and terrible mistakes and terrible choices in my lifetime. I am not a good person. I've done good things, and I try to make good choices, and I try to be better than I was. So before you think, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say, it's not easy for me to say. It's not easy for me to say. It's vital for me to say. Because I know in all other things that I have ever been wrong about, this is not one of them. I am right about this. There is always another way. I promise you there is. Please talk to someone, anyone. And if you know or have lost a Greg in your life, I'm sorry for your pain. I'm sorry for your loss. I feel it too, especially today. But you're not alone, and neither am I. Until next time, be well, be safe. Keep talking to each other. And I'll see you on the next one. We're not alone. I promise you that. I know how important it is to get a good night's sleep. Living with PTSD, I also know how hard it is to get a good night's rest, which is exactly why I have written, narrated, and recorded my very own sleep story that you can go and get off of my website, authormheneghan.com, and download it absolutely free. All I ask is that you take a listen to it, and if you like it, leave me a review or send me a message directly. But the most important thing that I ask is that you get a good night's sleep. Rain's story, the sleep aid, is available right now, authormheneghan.com. Go ahead and check it out. Now on to this episode of Unwritten Chapters, the podcast.